back to get some notes, they have the opportunity to do that. I know everyone's schedule is super busy. I heard from a couple folks today that, they have a soccer game, a PTO meeting, and an appointment to get to, and I totally get that. And a great thing that came out of our kind of digital age and learning how to work from home and learn from home is being able to use this feature. So this is being recorded now. If you ever have any questions that you maybe don't want recorded for everyone to hear at a later date, you can always shoot me an email afterwards. But we're going to hop into the slideshow. So again, my name is Abby Sherrier. I'm the Senior Director of Youth Programs at the Alphon Youth and Community Center. The American Heritage Tour is one of the things that I oversee. I also oversee our athletics programs, our teen programs, our martial arts programs, our summer camp programs, and I think that's it. I always feel like I'm forgetting one. But Heritage Tour, I've been with the Alphon Youth and Community Center for 8 years. Heritage Tour is one of the very first programs that I got involved with. I started my journey with our summer camps, got immediately involved with Heritage Tour that fall, and I've been involved ever since, with the exception being COVID. The year that was canceled due to COVID, that was not a year that I was part of the planning process, but then post-COVID, I got to start getting involved with the Heritage Tour again, and now I do all of the booking, planning, prep, with some help from some very special people. So what we're going to talk about today is a brief overview of the trip. I'm sure some of you may be familiar a little bit with what we typically do on the trip, but maybe some of you are totally new. So we'll quickly go over that. We'll also go over this year's pricing, some fundraising information, dates of the trip, how to enroll, and what chaperone groups look like. For future meetings, I'll talk about them a little bit more at the end. We will go over the itinerary in detail. Probably too much detail at times, and I know it can get a little bit of repetitive, but it's a really busy week. You guys pay a lot of money for the week, so I try and make sure that I can prep you as much as possible to maximize what you're getting out of the trip and for everyone to be on the same page. So this is, again, a brief overview of the trip. In future meetings, usually every single meeting, we go over 1 or 2 days of the itinerary in exclusive detail. So I'll answer questions at the end. Some of your questions we'll talk about when we get there. I may not have answers to yet because we're still booking a couple things as far as exact times, and exactly where we eat certain meals, that kind of stuff. But the gist of it, I've got for sure. So this trip is a 7-day trip, and on day 1, we leave from the AYCC in Waterville super early, and it's almost entirely just a travel day. We end up staying in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania, which is just outside Philadelphia. On the way down, we make a couple of stops, but it's really just a travel day to get us down to the general area where we spend most of our time. So while it's an early morning and a long day on the bus, we get to relax. I threw in a little shout out for Northeast Charter here. That's the bus company we use. We've used them for several years. We almost never have any bus issues, and the one time we have ever had a bus issue, which was on my bus last year, an hour from home on the last day, it was rough, but they resolved it really quickly. So they're a great company. They are certified IMG member. They do a lot of good work. We're happy to continue to work with them, and look forward to working with them again this year. Day 2, we leave the hotel. We only stay in that hotel that one night, pack up the bus, and we go into Philadelphia. I coordinate Independence Hall tickets for everyone, and then once you get your Independence Hall ticket, you get free time to explore Philadelphia until early afternoon. So you have enough time to hit a couple hot spots if you want to go to the Rocky Steps, if you want to go to the Art Museum, if you want to go to the History Museum, if you want to go to Reading Terminal. We have a couple different different scavenger hunts that we recommend around the city, but it's free time with your chaperone group to really explore. And then we get on the bus and we travel into DC. We do dinner in DC, and then we go do a guided tour at the 9/11 Memorial at the Pentagon. This is the first guided tour that we get for the trip and is very often on most people's surveys a highlight, if not their favorite thing of the trip. We get guides that have personal connections to the events of 9/11, specifically at the Pentagon. We work directly through a gentleman. His name is David. He is the sweetest guy. We bumped into him by happenstance on the trip. I'll tell you the full story because it is just one of those serendipitous things. But he worked at the Pentagon at the time of 9/11. He coordinates a group of guides who also either worked in the building, knew people who were in the building, were relatives of people who were in the building, and make sure that those guides are available for our group from Maine. And it's a really special thing every year. It's incredibly impactful. And we always look forward to seeing them, hearing their stories. And it's a really awesome way to kick off the trip and really set the tone for all of the learning that we're going to do throughout our week. On day 3, we depart our hotel pretty early in the morning. We do not switch hotels every day, but we do stay at 3 different hotels throughout the course of the week. So we stay at a hotel the very first night, and then we leave that hotel the next day. The next hotel that we go to, we stay in for 3 nights, and then our last switch is when we go to the New York, New Jersey area. We stay in that hotel 2 nights. So we don't have to switch all of the time. We get a few good nights to settle in where we're not dealing with luggage, but we do switch a couple of times. So on day 3, when we leave super early, it's to go over to George Washington's Mount Vernon estate, which is a gorgeous way to start the day. It's an active farm. They grow wildflowers, they grow food, they have animals. Usually we're really lucky to be there right after they have some baby goats and baby sheep that have been born. So it's a nice, easy walk around the day, around the morning. We do get a tour through the mansion itself, and there are a couple other points where you can hear from tour guides and people who work at the estate, but it is mostly a self-guided morning with your chaperone group. Ooh, excuse me, I thought I was going to sneeze. After Mount Vernon, we go to Arlington National Cemetery. You have some time there. We help prep on the bus ride from point A to point B. If you have any specific sites that you want to see, we'll help you find those on the map. We are also investigating doing a trolley trip around Arlington for the entire group this year, but I'm waiting on pricing to come back and availability for that. But I'm really hopeful that that is a great option for us this year. We talk about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and the changing of the guard, and you have plenty of time to see all of those things. Once we are done at Arlington National Cemetery, we go in for our first day or kind of afternoon of free time in DC. There are a million things to see in DC, and almost everything is free and almost everything you don't need a ticket for. The 2 big things that people always want to visit that you do need a timed entry ticket for is the Air and Space Museum and the Holocaust Museum. So I coordinate tickets for you for that. So this first day in DC, I'll have optional tickets for everyone to the Air and Space Museum. So if Air and Space Museum is not what you would like to do, you absolutely don't have to take one of those tickets. I think they're $1 each. They're very cheap. You just pay a quick processing fee. So if we don't use all of them, I usually just hand them out in the line to other folks who are trying to get in. But I'll have those booked. So if you want to do that, that'll be one of the first things you get to do when you get into DC. And then you have the rest of the afternoon to explore any of the other sites that you would like to see. And again, through talking about the itinerary, through our in-person meeting, and through all of the time we have together on the bus, myself and our other bus leaders will make sure that you are appropriately prepped to know what you're going to do with your day. So you're not just kind of wandering around aimlessly trying to make a decision with a group of students. We prep you a little bit better than that. Once you're done with your free time, we get together in the, I would say, like 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock range. We all get on the buses, and then we go over and do a tour of 3 or 4 of the monuments in DC. So we hit those as a group, so those aren't something that you necessarily need to go do independently during your free time. We'll do those when it starts getting dark, when they're all lit up. and give everyone an hour, hour and a half to see three or four on this night. And then on day four, we do some more of them. So day four, we start by driving into DC. We go over to the backside of the White House where we'll take some group photos. We usually do one big group photo. I'll help you guys coordinate doing some school photos if you're there with any of your friends. If you guys get any sponsors, which we'll talk about in a minute, we'll get those photos. So you can do some thank you cards. And then from there, we walk over to Ford's Theater. We do a play there where the play is about the night that Lincoln got assassinated. And we also get to go down in the museum and you can go through a walking tour of the Pressy House across the street. Pressy House may not be the right name, but that's the name that comes to mind right now. Once we're done with that, we'll have lunch together at the Hard Rock, and then you'll start your second afternoon of free time in DC. And this is when I'll have the optional tickets for the Holocaust Museum. So that's the other one where you need timed entry, and it's traditionally pretty hard to get day of or even the day before. So I'll get a bunch for everyone. If you take me up on my offer and take them, that's great. If you are not going to do that, that's also fine. I'll give out tickets to people in line at the museum who are trying to get in, but this is a good time and you're fairly close by from the Ford Theater and Hard Rock area to walk over and do the Holocaust Museum. And then you have all of your free time, and then we do the rest of the major DC monuments on this night. So between the two nights, you get to see a lot, if not almost all of the monuments right up close. The only monument that we don't do as one big group is the Washington Monument because it would take so long to get through. And we'll talk about that later when we go into detail of the itinerary of things that we definitely do as one big group and things that you guys should plan to do on your own. But the Washington Monument would be one of those things that you would want to set up tickets for and be able to do by yourself during your free time. Day 5 is a fun blend of travel day and seeing some really cool sights. We leave DC and head right over to Gettysburg National Military Park. We do a guided bus tour for about 2 hours around the military park. We're getting on and off the bus with one of the guides from the park itself. The national park provides us with guides. They're always great. They have lots of questions. Then we get off the bus, we'll go in, we'll have lunch at the actual National Military Park Information Center, and then we go in to see a quick film. We go to the cyclorama. There's a little bit of time to explore the museum on site, and then we get back on the bus and we drive out to Newark, New Jersey, because we are prepping ourselves for day 6, which is our New York City day. So we get all the way out to Newark, so we're just a quick drive into the city in the morning. We leave super early so that we can go in. We go to the 9/11 Memorial at Ground Zero. We see the memorial. We do not go into the museum. So that is another one of those things that you would want to plan to do on your own with your group if going into the museum is something you really want to do. And when we get into the itinerary, I'll talk about a couple timing options that would be the most efficient way to go and see that without having to travel all over Kingdom Come when we're in DC. After we spend some time at the memorial pools, we walk over to where you board the ferry to go out to Liberty and Ellis Island. We have one big chunk of time where you and your group can go see both before you have to be back on the mainland to meet us to get on the buses to go to your free time in New York City. So if you and your group want to spend a lot of time at the Statue of Liberty, walking around, taking photos, and you only really want to go over to Ellis Island for maybe 30 minutes, then you can kind of plan out your time accordingly. Or if you're someone who really wants to go into Ellis Island and look up some names and explore that more, you could have a quicker trip at Liberty Island, head right over on the ferry, go to Ellis, spend more time there, and then meet us back. So we don't travel between the islands as a whole group, just to allow people a little bit more freedom and based on what their interests and what they would like to do. This is a pretty late night. We stay and explore New York City with your free time fairly late into the evening. It's usually around 7:45 to 8:30 that we talk about getting back on the bus. We'll decide that later once we know our ticket times for a couple other things earlier in the day. But it's the last night that we're all together on the trip, and a lot of times the students have a ton of fun exploring New York City. When we do our free time, we get on the buses near the ferry terminal for Liberty Island, and then the buses will drive us up much closer to Times Square, and that's where you can get off the bus and start your free time. So we try and get you close to what a lot of people are going to want to do. It will be a big walking day, but the day before was at Gettysburg National Military Park, a lot of time on the bus. So hopefully you've kind of recouped from the first few busy days of the trip and you can put in your last big day of steps here in New York City. Day seven is mostly just a travel home day. We do stop in Boston for lunch. If you know anyone who went last year, we stopped at a Red Sox game. That was a really specific instance where it happened to be YMCA day on the day that we happened to be traveling back. That circumstance I don't think is going to happen this year, timing wise. So unfortunately, that's not on our docket this year. But we will stop in Boston. You'll have time to explore the downtown area, grab some lunch, stretch your legs. We get back on the bus and we head back home. Our goal is usually to be home between like 8 and 9 o'clock that night so that we can unload buses and people can be back at a reasonable time. I know every year we have a handful of people that have to go to work the next day. That's pretty brutal. So we try and get home at a halfway decent hour. That's the whole trip. So, getting right into the pricing for this year, it is almost exactly the same as last year. It's 1,800 for a student and 1,550 for a chaperone. It did go up $50. We had to accommodate some hotel pricing that we don't have much control over, but we tried to keep that pricing impact to a minimum. So what is included in this price is your 7 days of travel. We coordinate all of the buses, your 6 nights in hotels. We coordinate all of the hotels. We facilitate some, but not all meals. And in the itinerary, it explicitly lays out which meals we provide, which meals we do not, so that you can plan and budget accordingly to pay for some meals while you're on the trip. And also on the itinerary, we outline exactly what entry fees we pay to certain historical sites and which ones you would want to go to on your own. For example, we pay for the guided tour, the cyclorama, the movie, everything at Gettysburg National Military Park. You shouldn't have any costs that day unless you decide you want to buy something from the gift shop versus a day where you may have free time in Philadelphia. We get your tickets for Independence Hall and coordinate all of that. But your free time, if you wanted to ride one of the big red buses around the city, you would have to pay for that ticket to ride the bus around the city, one of those tour buses. So you can kind of pick and choose what you would like. In every city, there are a ton of really, really awesome free options, but we can certainly talk about budget as if you want to do some different things. I've been on the trip a lot. I've done a lot of those things. I have tried out the trip in a way where my mindset was to spend as little of my own money as possible, really put myself in shoes of like I'm trying to do this trip just paying the cost of a student or a chaperone. These are the meals I get. I have to buy a few foods, but what if I wanted to do only free sites? And I had a great time. I've also done the trip where I've done a couple paid options, and those were fun too. But sometimes I've found myself saying, "Oh, the free botanical gardens was way cooler than this Van Gogh exhibit that I got to see today." So I can have all of those conversations with you guys, either as groups or as individuals via email. What I would recommend, what I don't think is worth your money, or what may be worth your money because of your specific interest, but was kind of meh for me. So we'll go over all of that. We do two Heritage Tour jackets, or two Heritage Tour t-shirts and a jacket as well. We'll talk a lot about appropriate apparel for the trip and what we do for safety reasons on the trip, as far as being able to identify our students and our chaperones. And then, of course, the last bullet is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I wouldn't come back every year to have you guys join this trip if I didn't think it was a good value, if I didn't think it was a good trip. I have looked the trip upside down, backwards, sideways, all of it. I've gone with people who did it 10 years ago. I've gone with people who've done it 30 years ago. This is a really fun trip. This is a trip that I wish I could have gone on when I was in eighth grade with my parents, with my friends. And again, if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be here talking to you about it today. So I do think it's a once in a lifetime experience. And I do think it's a good value for your dollar. And I hope for everyone who gets to come on the trip, they agree. So that's a big sticker price. We do always try our best to help facilitate some fundraising ideas. Again, I've been involved for a long time. Some of you may remember when we used to facilitate a car raffle. We do not do that anymore. But what we do recommend is schools and students to do individual fundraising. We've seen that be much more successful and productive than what we did with the car raffle. I always have a few schools and communities in my mind as I think about what's worked for fundraising and what hasn't. I'm not going to use their names. If you ever want to reach out to me as an individual and say, can I pick someone's brain? I can probably connect you with some people who've been really successful before. But I cannot advocate enough for trying to get community sponsors for the kids that are in your son or daughter's eighth grade class. We have had schools that have fully funded their students' trips and then paid for their chaperones on the side by getting business sponsors for their students. And we can even coordinate you getting t-shirts and putting those sponsors' logos on the back of the t-shirts. That's something that we've done successfully before as well. And that's just having good connections, talking to people. A lot of businesses know about the trip. A lot of the businesses owners have sent their own kids, or maybe they even went on the trip. So start thinking now about what businesses do you think would be really interested in supporting. We've also had schools and groups of students be super successful with doing concession stands during winter sports to help advocate. They've done smaller raffles. I can tell you I got a world-class education in raffles that are worth a certain dollar amount where the Maine State Gambling Commission has to get involved, and I don't recommend those, but I can certainly talk to you about the raffles that are more effective and that don't have to involve the Maine State Gambling Commission to the nth degree. We've also had people be really successful with craft fairs, paint nights, all of the typical fundraising. But what we have noted is that the American Heritage Tour is a really recognized trip, and people really believe in supporting students being able to have this opportunity. What we do ask is if that you are doing a fundraiser to help support the trip, is that A, you let me know. That way, if I get a business calling and saying, can I have your tax exempt form? Can I get, something to show that I donated towards this or whatever, then I know what they're talking about and who they've been working with. I also ask that if you are fundraising, especially as a group, so maybe it's the whole eighth grade class that really wants to go on this trip, they're working together, is that you try your best to include all of the students that want to go on the trip. I know that this trip is not for every student. I know some students do not care to go. I know some students that maybe want to go but don't want to put the effort into helping to fundraise. But I do just ask that you be open to everyone. If there's a student who wants to go but maybe doesn't have the support to fundraise, if you can take them under your wing, help them out, or point them in my direction and I can see what I can do on my end, that would be greatly appreciated, because I do think that everyone deserves a shot at being able to go on this trip. And I think students have been pretty motivated in the past to help get themselves there. And that's awesome. It's a great life lesson to learn. And I'm happy to help with that. So we do have, on a similar note, very limited need-based scholarships available through the AYCC. If, again, you've talked to people in the past, maybe you've had an older son or daughter who's gone on the trip in the last couple of years, we were, I'm going to say, blessed. A good thing that came out of COVID was that we got a pool of money that was given to the AYCC because it couldn't be used for the trips that were canceled that first year of COVID. There were a whole group of people that fundraised for the trip through the car raffle, and because of the Maine State Gambling Commission, we could not refund those dollars because those dollars were raised for a very specific thing. I'm oversimplifying it at this point, but we had a lot of people who elected to still go on the trip, so they deferred those funds and kept it in their account and went on the trip as 9th or 10th graders, or deferred it for their family to use as their younger siblings became 8th graders. But we also had a good portion of people who said, you know what, this trip wasn't in the cards for me. My raffle funding that I fundraised for can go into this pool of scholarship money for people to be able to use for future trips. And that's what we have been blessed to use as scholarship funding for the last couple of years, and was able to really revitalize the trip and get a lot of people on the trip again post-COVID. That was not a bottomless bucket of money. We used it diligently for as long as we could, and we are at pretty much the bottom of that. So when I say that we have limited need-based scholarships, it is pretty limited, and we're going to try and impact as many people as we can with those few dollars that we have left. When registration opens, the scholarship applications will also be open. You will complete those, you will send them to me. I am not the one who decides what anyone gets. There's a formula, that's why we say need-based. If there are special circumstances that you think someone should consider, make sure you include that in your paperwork. And then it is a team of people that look it over. So it's no one person who's saying, yep, I think this person gets this and that person gets that. It goes through several steps of diligence to make sure that we are using the funds in the best possible way. And like I said, those applications will be available when registration opens. So the dates for the trip: Friday, April 18th, we leave super early in the morning. Thursday, April 24th, we will get back very late in the evening. The trip will be open to 150 total people. So that's a combination of students and chaperones. If we reach a point where we have 150 people and more trying to register, we will open a wait list. And if I get enough people to warrant paying for another bus, then we will open that up and we'll take 4 buses instead of 3. But for right now, we're going to start with 150. Last year, we had 132. I foresee this year being similar. So I don't think there's any big push or rush to get registered once registration opens, but just keep in mind that there are some specific dates and specific enrollment caps that we have, just to make sure that we're being as responsible with everyone's time as possible. The trip is open enrollment, so anyone can enroll from any school. So any 8th grader, whether they are in Southern Maine, Northern Maine, anywhere in between, homeschooled, if you're in 8th grade, you can register. With the nuance of participants really need to know who their chaperone is going to be. And we have no more than 4 people in a chaperone group, and one of those 4 has to be an adult. This is what always trips people up, and as we kind of get down the road and people start registering, I will help everyone navigate this, but all this essentially means is that every student that enrolls should know who their chaperone is going to be, whether that's going to be their own parent, their aunt, their grandfather, their friend's mom, their friend's dad. Whoever it is, they really need to know who that chaperone is going to be. And then once we know what students belong to what chaperones, we can either make your group of 4, so you know who your group of 4 people are going to be, whether it's 2 moms and their daughters, or a dad and his son and his 2 friends. Ideally, we're making a group of 4. It can be a group of 3. So if we have, dad and his daughter and his daughter's friend, and they want to come on the trip, that's your group of 3. You're all sharing one hotel room. And that's how we proceed forward. And again, we'll talk about this in way more detail, but the way the hotel rooms work is we cannot put more than 4 people into a hotel room, and we do not book hotel rooms for just 2 people. So it's either you have 3 or 4 people, there are 2 beds to every hotel room. There's very often pull-out couches in the hotel rooms as well. You navigate kind of who's sleeping in what beds from there. We can help you navigate any conversations if maybe, your friend or your son and his friend want to be in a room together, but you don't really know his friend's dad very well, we can help you talk about that. We've done this a lot. Every single year, we help navigate all of these different circumstances, and we're happy to continue to do so. But I do, again, need you to at least start with knowing who the chaperone of your student is going to be, and then we can go from there. So next steps. The first thing, I think, really talking to your friends and families and deciding who your student chaperone would be. If you are a chaperone, talk to your student and say, do you have friends who are coming who need a chaperone? Do you have friends who are coming who know that their parents want to come? If you don't know anyone else from your community who's going on the trip, that's totally fine as well. But just start having the conversations about who wants to do this, how do we make it happen, and who's going that you may know. A lot of times we've had family members who are in totally different schools on opposite ends of the state, but the cousins want to go, so the aunts go with them and they have a great time. Or we've had granddad take his 2 grandchildren and they have a lot of fun. So as the holidays start creeping up, I would start thinking and having the conversations about the trip. Registration for the trip does open on October 30th. So at the end of the month, registration is only available online. We don't have paper registrations. Online, I'm not going to lie, it's a little clunky if you're not familiar with the DaxGo system, but it is possible. And it is really important that you register as soon as you know you want to go on the trip, because I book tickets and book rooms and everything based on how many people I anticipate having on the trip. So if there's more people and I need more rooms, I need to know that. If there's less people and I need less rooms, I need to know that too. So as soon as you know, you can let me know. Continue to attend these meetings. We will have monthly meetings. They will always be on the first Tuesday of the month at 6 p.m. until about February, when we start having in-person meetings, and I'll nail down dates for that as we get closer. But those in-person meetings will be at the Alphon Youth and Community Center. And here I do have meetings are mandatory for all participants, but like I said at the very beginning of this meeting, I totally understand that everyone's lives are super busy. It's my job to make time for this meeting to happen, and I promise you I will do that, but I understand that you all have your own jobs and your own lives, and it just simply may not be possible sometimes on Tuesdays at 6 o'clock. And that is why the meeting is recorded. I'll post it along with the slideshow, and I do the transcription converted into meeting notes as well. So if you just want to read the gist of the meeting, you can definitely do that. But what I do need from all participants is the commitment that you will review that information, and not just the chaperones, but the students as well. There's a lot of safety information we go over, and just for efficiency's sake and for what everyone can get as value out of the trip, if everyone at least has the baseline expectation to review the meetings, then hopefully no one gets on the trip and feels like they're being slowed down because someone else has to have things explained to them, even though it's been gone over in meetings a lot. That can get frustrating. Sometimes it's kind of funny on day 1 if you're always 10 minutes late to things, but on day 5, people start getting pretty upset. So that's why it's important to review all the information, be really familiar with the itinerary, how things work, and what expectations are on the trip. I'm going to close out from sharing my screen and see if we have any questions in the chat. If you have not put any questions in the chat and you have some, you can do that now. Peterson House. Thank you, Lisa. Pressy House is on my mind for a totally different reason. But Peterson House, that's what I was searching for. But for right now, if anyone has any questions, you can pop them into the chat, or you can turn your camera on, turn your mic on, go ahead and ask. If you don't have any questions and you were just here to get that baseline information, you are all set to head out. You don't have to stay on, but if you want to hear if anyone else has some questions, you're welcome to stick with us.
Hey, Abby, Kara Ware here. So I have a question. Are the mandatory meetings in person? Who attends those? Is it just the chaperone and the group that's going, or do all parents with the kid that's going need to attend?
Great question. So the virtual meetings are open to anyone.
Yeah.
But ideally it's either the chaperone or the student, in a perfect world, both. The in-person meetings, once we start scheduling those, and it's very likely only going to be one in March, to help hand out t-shirts and jackets, but that one, again, in a perfect world, it's whoever is attending the trip. If your student is going with another chaperone, it would be great if you as the parent could come along to help them, understand what's going on, see if you have any questions or concerns as a parent, but it's really just mandatory for the participants.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anyone else have any questions?
Hey, I have a quick question. If registration's due the 30th, when does the payment have to be made?
Another great question. Registration opens on the 30th, and at that time, you'll be required to make a $200 deposit on our website, which I can share my screen.
Did I lose it?
I think Abby, oh, there she is. Okay.
Sorry, the share button for Teams is really close to the leave this meeting button, and I just excused myself accidentally. Let me share my screen this time. There we go. So on Alphon Youth and Community Center, if you go to the American Heritage Tour website, there are all of these drop downs. So when you register for the trip, there is a $200 deposit required, but when you look at this payment and refund policies, it lays out when payment is due in full, but also if you have to drop out at really any time before the trip, how much of whatever you have paid you would be refunded. So we do have to have payment in full. I'm trying to see, processing fees. Payment is due in full by March 1st. So essentially until March 1st, if all you want to put towards the trip is $200, that's totally up to you. If you don't ask for a refund by November 4th, which is a pretty tight turnaround from October 1st, you may not get your full deposit back, but up until March 1, we can be pretty flexible. After March 1, we have booked a lot of different things that are non-refundable on our end. So that kind of buy-in increases at that point. Essentially, anything up to March 13th, we can be flexible and hopefully get some of your money back if you're dropping out for just about any reason. After March 13th, we cannot guarantee a refund. And when I say that, I want to be really clear that if you have a family emergency, if something happens, we are going to work every which way we can to help you, and we in no way want to keep your money if you are not coming on the trip. We've had circumstances happen before. In our first trip back from COVID, we had some pretty strict policies. And we had people who had to drop out like 2 days before. And I was able to talk to all of those places that we had booked already and get refunds back from them, which means I can pass those refunds on to the participants. I just can't guarantee that that's going to happen after that March 13th date. So for full transparency, I want everyone to know, and that's why that policy is posted on our website, and that's what we stick to. If I know some people like to schedule payments so that they don't have to worry about having a big lump sum at any point, you can schedule that through the registration system. So you can schedule a monthly payment to be automatically withdrawn, or you can kind of set your own calendar reminders to make payments along the way. That's totally up to you. But the $200 deposit, if you want to just pay that and maybe you're filling out a scholarship application or you're going to do some fundraising, so you want to take some time and not put any more money down until you have a better understanding of what that total bill would be, that's totally fine. We just need the $200 deposit so that we can start booking all of these reservations that you guys will need to have a good trip. Any other questions? I will give a quick shout out to Lisa Plord, who is in the chat, and I could hear her telling everyone that I accidentally kicked myself out of my own meeting. Lisa has been on the trip more than almost anybody else. She goes with us every year. She's a guidance counselor at Coney. She's a lovely, lovely lady. We always get raving reviews on the Heritage Tour. I believe some people think that their favorite part of the trip is Lisa. And she joins the meetings so that she can help kind of answer questions in the chat as I'm talking and make sure that I don't miss anything at the end. But she is a crucial part to our trip. So shout out Lisa for always being here. Love you. Couldn't do it without you. Do we have any other questions? I'm going to pop my email back into the chat. Email is absolutely the best way to get a hold of me. I do have an office at the AYCC. My schedule is crazy all the time, so it's really hard for me to just be in my office and be available, unfortunately. It's also pretty brutal for me to get to all my voicemails in one day. But an email, I'm always on, especially as we get closer to the trip, you'll start getting emails from me at like 10 o'clock at night because I'm still working. But I try and answer questions super quick that way. So I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend if you have any questions, just shoot me an email and you'll get the fastest response that way. If you do need to set up a meeting with me, please reach out and we'll get something scheduled. If you're trying to see me, please don't just drive to the AYCC because I would hate to waste your time because I'm not always available to come down. If I am, I definitely will. But every once in a while, we have people show up and ask, and I'm like stuck in a 2-hour meeting. And trust me, I'd rather talk to you. So just be aware. Would love to get something on the schedule if you need to chat about the trip. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.